Educasts require that you consider the problem of evil as presented by the scholars Rowe and Paul. The evidential problem of evil is based upon the idea of probability. This shows that even if the qualities of God and the existence of evil can be thought of without being logically inconsistent, the existence of evil and suffering lower the probability of God's existence. This would mean that even if God's existence is not logically impossible, it is so much less likely, particularly in the light of the lack of any other significant evidence for his existence, and is not convincing as a part of an explanation for the existence of evil. This argument has been put forward by William L. Rowe, who expressed it like this. There exist instances of suffering that an omnipotent and omnibenevolent God could have prevented without compromising his characteristics or allowing worse evil to occur. Such a being would prevent suffering if it could, unless his character would be compromised or worse evil would be caused. Therefore, there does not exist an omnipotent and omnibenevolent being. Rowe gives the analogy of a fawn trapped in a forest fire. In this instance, there is no benefit to anyone made by this tragedy, as no one knows it happened. Such events are then surely inconsistent with the God of classical theism, who is both at once omnibenevolent and omnipotent, since if he did exist, then it would be highly unlikely that he would allow such suffering to occur. In The Holocaust of the Children, the American author, paleontologist and illustrator Gregory Paul gives a statistical analysis of the deaths and suffering of immature humans. He pays particular attention to the death and suffering that occurs as a result of natural evil to those who would normally be called innocents. The purpose of this was to challenge the existence of the theistic God from an Paul begins by considering the amount of deaths that have occurred as a result of pregnancies that have not reached their full term. Paul estimates that if you only count those pregnancy losses that have occurred as a result of natural causes, not those caused deliberately, then losses stand somewhere at 300 billion natural losses at the time of writing. All this takes into account improved health of mothers and the work done by many humans to challenge or slow the rate of losses. He claims that that amount of natural terminations swamped the amount of deliberate terminations threefold. Since humans appeared, about 50 billion children have lost their lives before maturity, which he estimates is about half the total who were born. Christian children in history have been subject to as much death as other children, and whilst modern medicine has slowed infant mortality, in the third world infant mortality is about as high. Losses as a result of war have been a small fraction in comparison to naturally occurring disasters. He cites the death of children under the hands of evil dictators such as Hitler, Khan, Pol Pot and Stalin cumulatively have destroyed less young people than have occurred as a result of non-human causes. Death from diseases such as malaria, from malnutrition and famine, which can take a prolonged period of time, causes very intense suffering. He also cites the losses as a result of floods and earthquakes. For those who survive, most at some stage will experience suffering of a significant kind through sickness, injury, disability, or mental ill health. If the state of affairs were any worse than this, the population would not have been able to grow, so it is about as bad as it is possible to be without humanity dying out. He describes the system as merciless and ruthless. He sees natural disaster as being significantly worse than the Holocaust. The Holocaust claimed about 1.7 million children's lives, yet natural disasters totaled deaths in the several billions over the course of 10,000 generations. This is the Holocaust of the children. Paul notices that statistically prayer is largely ineffectual as a method of preventing or solving the problems of the suffering of innocence. Practical, earthly methods have been the only thing that is at all helpful. If a creator exists, then he has chosen to fashion a habitat that maximizes suffering using factors that are beyond human control. There is no evidence that prayer or favour has worked in any way. It seems to make no statistical difference if people hold to a particular faith or none. He claims that theodicy has not paid enough attention to this problem, and that more attention is paid to animal suffering than the suffering of children. The theodicies which cite the importance of the free will of human beings as a solution to the problem of evil, or those who suggest that this is the best of all possible worlds, are incorrect. Scholars like Hick have argued that this is the best of all possible worlds, and necessary for the freedom of the will, on the basis that evil is a teaching tool necessary for human development. But this assumes that children become adults, and Paul has demonstrated that in the majority of cases this does not happen. Swinburne speaks about the development of second-order goods like charity as a result of necessary evil. Yet there seems to be a wholly unfair distribution of suffering and death, which is not consistent with it being a teaching tool. In fact, most of Christianity welcomes the comfort offered by civilization and aims for it rather than rejecting it. So comfort and freedom from suffering are seen by all as desirable. In Western societies, children get a great degree of protection from their families and from systems of government, and such behaviour is welcomed by Christianity. We do so much to protect our children, and yet the Father has done nothing. A truly omnipotent God would have used some of his power to protect the children himself. It seems that this is what he wanted, given that he's used revelation to direct us to do so ourselves. All in all, there can be no moral creator.